I woke up at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of my husband whispering another woman's name. Not mine, not anyone I knew. Lila, he murmured softly, like it belonged to a memory he cherished. I lay there, frozen beside Richard, staring at the ceiling while my heart pounded in my ears. After 32 years of marriage, I thought I knew every corner of this man, his habits, his silences, even his dreams. But that name, it didn't belong in our life, and somehow I felt it had been there much longer than I had. By morning, I knew one thing for sure. For the first time in my life, I was going to check my husband's phone. If this moment already made your heart race, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Don't forget to like and subscribe if you love emotional family stories like this. And I'd really love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Morning came too quickly. I don't remember falling asleep again, only that the faint gray light creeping through the curtains felt like a stranger in my bedroom. Richard was already awake, standing at the kitchen counter in his usual spot, pouring coffee into the same chipped mug he'd used for years. The scent drifted toward me, warm, familiar, comforting. And suddenly I hated it, because nothing about this morning felt normal anymore. "Morning, Ev," he said casually when I stepped into the kitchen. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, just like always. "You sleep okay?" I forced a small smile, the kind I'd practiced over decades of polite conversations and family gatherings. "Yeah, fine." Lie. I watched him closely as he moved around the kitchen, buttering toast, glancing at his phone, humming under his breath. There was no sign of guilt, no hesitation, no shadow of the man who had whispered another woman's name like a secret he couldn't even keep from his own dreams. That made it worse. If he had looked nervous, I could have blamed something obvious. An affair, a mistake, something simple, painful but understandable. But this felt deeper, older. "Busy day?" I asked, trying to sound casual as I poured myself coffee. "Yeah, a couple of logistics meetings. Might run late," he replied, not looking up. "Run late." My stomach tightened. I nodded, pretending to scroll through my phone while secretly watching his every movement. I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before. How he turned his phone screen away slightly when a notification appeared, how quickly he cleared it, how his thumb lingered just a second longer than necessary. Had he always done that? Or was I just seeing it now because I was looking after breakfast? He grabbed his keys and jacket. "I'll see you tonight, okay?" "Okay." I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He paused for a moment like he wanted to say something else. Then he just nodded and walked out the door. I stood there long after I heard his car disappear down the street. The house felt different without him, quieter, heavier, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to do something I had never done before. I stared at the kitchen table where he had left his coffee ring still faintly damp. 32 years of marriage, and I had never once gone through his phone. Not during hard times, not during fights, not even during the early years when insecurity came easier. Trust had been the one thing we always held on to, until last night. My hand started to shake before I even reached for it. His phone was on the counter right where he had forgotten it. That alone sent a chill through me. Richard never forgot his phone. Never. For a brief moment I considered stopping, walking away, pretending none of this had happened. But then I heard it again in my mind. Lila, soft, intimate, familiar. Not the way you say a stranger's name. The way you say someone who lives somewhere inside you. I picked up the phone. My fingers hovered over the screen. "What are you doing, Everly?" I whispered to myself. But I already knew. I was choosing the truth, no matter what it cost me. The phone lit up easily. No password, just like always. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Because if he had nothing to hide, why did I feel like I was about to uncover something that could break everything? I opened his messages first. Nothing. Normal conversations, work threads, group chats with family, a few jokes from Lucas, a reminder from Sophia about an upcoming birthday dinner. Everything looked clean. Too clean. My chest tightened. I moved to his call history. Empty. Not completely empty, but there were obvious gaps. Large stretches of time with no calls at all, which made no sense for someone in his line of work. And then I noticed it. At the very top, a single number, unsaved, called multiple times in short bursts. The timestamps were recent. Last night, early morning. My pulse quickened. I tapped on it. No name, no details, just a number that meant nothing, and everything at the same time. I swallowed hard and went back. Think Everly. Don't rush. I opened his photos next. Again, nothing unusual. Family pictures, old vacations, random snapshots of the backyard, the dog receipts for work expenses. Then I saw it. A folder I had never noticed before. Hidden. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were only a handful of images. Not romantic, not inappropriate, but they stopped my heart anyway. A modest house I didn't recognize, a street sign from a town I had never heard of, and one photo, taken from a distance. A woman, not young, maybe early 30s, dark hair pulled back standing outside what looked like a clinic or office building. The photo wasn't clear enough to see her expression, but it wasn't the kind of photo you take by accident. It was deliberate, quiet, like he didn't want her to know he was there. My stomach dropped. "Who are you?" I whispered to the image. Was this Lila? I backed out slowly, my breath shallow, and opened his notes app. That's where I found it. A single note. No title. No context. Just one sentence I should have told her years ago. I stared at those words until they blurred. Her. Not me. Or was it me? My mind raced trying to piece it together. A hidden contact, deleted calls, secret photos, and a sentence filled with regret. This wasn't random. This was something that had been building for a long time. Something he had chosen not to tell me. A cold wave of realization washed over me. This wasn't just about another woman. This was about a secret. A deep one. My hands went numb as I went back to the call history and copied the number. I didn't even fully realize what I was doing until I was already dialing it. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each ring tightened something inside my chest. And then click. Hello. A woman's voice. Calm. Older than I expected. Not playful. Not flirtatious. Careful. "Hi," I said, my voice barely steady. I'm looking for Lila. Silence, not confusion, not surprise. Silence that felt heavy, like I had just stepped into something I wasn't supposed to see. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. Colder, measured. "You shouldn't be the one calling me." My breath caught. What does that mean? Who is this? Another pause. Then quietly. "Ask your husband." And the line went dead. I sat there in the middle of my kitchen phone, still pressed to my ear, my reflection staring back at me from the dark screen. Ask your husband. If this had been an affair, she would have denied it. If it had been nothing, she would have explained. But she didn't. She knew exactly who I was. And she knew something I didn't. Something Richard had kept from me. For years. My knees felt weak as I lowered myself into the chair. 32 years, 2 children, a lifetime of shared memories, and suddenly, I didn't know what was real anymore. I looked down at the phone in my hands, the same phone I had trusted not to hold secrets. I was wrong, terribly wrong, because whatever this was, it wasn't new, it wasn't casual, and it definitely wasn't over. I didn't call the number again, not because I didn't want to, but because something deep in my gut told me I had already crossed a line I could never uncross. Whatever that woman meant by "you shouldn't be the one calling me," it wasn't a warning meant to protect me. It was a warning about something bigger, something I wasn't prepared for. So instead of confronting Richard that night, I did something I never imagined myself doing. I watched him, really watched him. That evening, I stood at the kitchen sink pretending to rinse vegetables while keeping my eyes fixed on the reflection in the window. Richard sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, his expression unreadable. Every so often, his thumb paused, then moved quickly again as if he were deciding what to keep and what to erase. "Everything okay?" he asked without looking up. I flinched slightly. "Yeah, why you've been quiet today?" I forced a soft laugh. "Just tired." He nodded, accepting it too easily. That bothered me more than anything, because if he truly knew me, he would have seen through that lie in a heartbeat. Or maybe he did, and chose not to push. Dinner passed in a strange, fragile silence, the kind that feels like glass, clear on the surface, but ready to shatter with the smallest pressure. We talked about ordinary things, Lucas's new project at work, Sophia's upcoming visit, the neighbor's dog that kept barking at night, normal life, a life that suddenly felt staged. After dinner, Richard stepped outside saying he needed some fresh air. I watched him through the curtain as he stood near the edge of the yard, his back to the house phone pressed to his ear. My heart started racing again. He spoke quietly, too quietly for me to hear, but his posture was tense, not relaxed, not affectionate, burdened. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. Who was he talking to? Her, or someone connected to her? And why did it look like every word cost him something? When he came back inside, I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch television. "All good?" I asked casually. "Yeah," he said a little too quickly. "Work stuff, work." That word used to mean something. Now it felt like a shield. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, I found myself studying him in the mirror. The same man I had built a life with, the same lines on his face, the same tired eyes, the same steady movements. And yet, not the same. Because now there was a version of him I didn't know, a version that whispered another woman's name in his sleep, a version that kept secrets. I lay beside him in the dark, my back turned, my eyes wide open. I wanted to ask him. I wanted to shake him awake and demand the truth. But the memory of that phone call stopped me. Ask your husband if I asked him now, would he tell me or would he lie? Worse, would he tell me just enough to make me stop asking? The next morning I made a decision. If the truth wasn't going to come to me, I was going to find it piece by piece, even if it broke me. I called Valerie that afternoon. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Everly. What's going on?" I hesitated for a moment, staring out at the quiet street in front of my house. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Her tone shifted instantly. "Okay, you're scaring me. What is it?" I took a deep breath. "Have you ever suspected your husband of having a life you didn't know about?" There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. "Everly. What happened?" I told her everything, the whisper, the phone, the hidden folder, the note, the call. By the time I finished, my voice was shaking. Valerie didn't interrupt once. When I finally fell silent, she let out a slow breath. "Okay, that's not nothing." "No," I whispered, "it's not." "Do you think he's cheating?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "That's the problem. It doesn't feel like cheating. It feels worse. Worse how I struggled to find the words. Like this didn't just start recently. Like it's been there for years, and I just never saw it." Valerie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Then it's either an affair that's been going on a long time, or something else entirely." "Like what blackmail? Family secret? Hidden child?" She said it lightly, but the words hit me like a punch. I swallowed hard. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking," she replied gently. "Men keep things buried for all kinds of reasons, especially things from before the marriage. Before the marriage. The phrase lingered in my mind. Richard had a life before me. Of course he did. But we had always told each other everything that mattered, or at least I thought we had. "What would you do?" I asked quietly. Valerie didn't hesitate. I'd find out who that number belongs to. For real this time. "I already called," I said. "She shut me down. Then go see her." My heart skipped. "What?" "You have a location, don't you?" From the photos, I closed my eyes, remembering the street sign, the unfamiliar town. "Yes, then stop guessing," Everly Valerie said firmly. "Go get answers." That night, I didn't follow her advice. Not yet. Instead, I did something smaller, something quieter. I started paying attention to the details I had ignored for years. The next morning, when Richard left for work, I noticed he didn't take his usual route. I watched from the window as his car turned left instead of right. That had never happened before. I waited 5 minutes, then grabbed my keys. My heart was pounding as I pulled out of the driveway. "What are you doing?" I whispered to myself. But I didn't stop. I followed the direction he had gone, keeping a careful distance. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. For 20 minutes, everything seemed normal. Traffic lights, gas stations, familiar roads. Then suddenly, he turned off the main road, into a quieter area. Less traffic, fewer houses. My breath caught as I slowed down, trying not to be obvious. Up ahead, his car pulled into a small parking lot. Not an office building, not a warehouse. Something else. I parked farther back, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Richard stepped out of his car, and then he just stood there. Not moving, not going inside, just standing, like he was trying to gather the courage to do something or stop himself from doing it. After a long moment, he turned back, got into his car, and drove away. I sat there in stunned silence. What had that been? He didn't meet anyone, didn't go inside, didn't even make a call. He just stood there, like a man haunted by something. A chill ran down my spine, because in that moment, something shifted inside me. This wasn't an affair, not in the way I understood it. This was something heavier, something tied to guilt, to the past, to something unfinished. I looked up at the building he had been staring at, and that's when I saw it. A small sign near the entrance, faded, almost overlooked, but clear enough to read. My breath stopped, because suddenly, the pieces were starting to come together, and whatever this was, it was bigger than I had imagined. I sat frozen in my car, staring at the sign as if it might disappear if I blinked. Ridgeview Women's Health Center. The words settled slowly, heavily, like stones sinking to the bottom of a still lake. Women's health. My mind immediately jumped to the worst conclusions. Affairs, secret appointments, hidden lives. But something about Richard's behavior didn't match any of those. He hadn't gone inside. He hadn't met anyone. He had just stood there, like a man standing at the edge of something he couldn't bring himself to face, or couldn't bring himself to leave behind. My chest tightened. "What are you involved in?" I whispered. The parking lot was quiet, almost empty. A few cars sat scattered across the faded lines. The building itself looked modest clean, professional, unremarkable. Nothing about it screamed scandal, and yet everything about it felt wrong. I stayed there for a long time. Long enough for the initial panic to settle into something colder, something more focused. If I walked in right now, what would I even say hi? I think my husband is hiding something here. Can you tell me what it is? Ridiculous. No. This wasn't something I could rush. Not yet. I took one last look at the building, then started the car and drove away, my thoughts spinning faster with every mile. By the time I got home, I felt like I was carrying something heavy inside my chest, something invisible but impossible to ignore. The house greeted me with silence. The same silence that had once been peaceful now felt suffocating. I walked through the room slowly, my eyes catching on things that suddenly felt unfamiliar. The framed photos on the wall, our wedding picture, the kids when they were young, holidays, smiles, a life, a real one. But now I couldn't stop asking myself how much of it had been built on something I didn't know. I shook my head, trying to push the thought away. "No," I said out loud, "don't do that. Because whatever this was, it didn't erase everything. It couldn't." And yet doubt had already taken root. That afternoon, I found myself doing something I hadn't planned. I went down to the basement. At first, I told myself I was just looking for old tax documents. Something practical, something normal. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was searching for anything, for something, for proof that this feeling in my chest wasn't just paranoia. The basement smelled faintly of dust and old cardboard. Boxes lined the shelves, years of storage labeled in Richard's neat handwriting, Christmas decorations, old files, kids' school stuff, pieces of our life carefully packed away. I moved slowly, opening boxes, flipping through folders, pretending I wasn't looking for something specific, until I reached the back corner. There, tucked behind a stack of plastic bins, was a box I didn't recognize. No label, no markings, just there. My heartbeat picked up as I crouched down and pulled it forward. It was heavier than I expected. For a moment I hesitated. "Don't," I whispered to myself, because something told me that whatever was inside this box, I couldn't unsee it. But that voice was quieter than the one that needed answers. I opened it. Inside, everything was neatly arranged, too neatly, like it had been handled carefully and rarely. The first thing I saw was a folded document, yellowed slightly with age. My hands trembled as I picked it up. A death certificate. My breath caught. Name Teresa Monroe. Date over 30 years ago. Cause of death. Complications during childbirth. My vision blurred for a moment as I tried to process it. Childbirth. My fingers tightened around the paper. Richard had known someone named Teresa, someone who died giving birth. Why had he never told me? I swallowed hard and reached deeper into the box. There was a hospital bracelet. Small, too small for an adult, a baby's bracelet. I stared at it, my heart pounding louder with every second. No. My hands shook as I picked up the next item, a photograph, old, faded at the edges. In it, a young woman stood outside what looked like a hospital. She was smiling softly, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. Pregnant. I didn't need anyone to tell me who she was. Teresa. She looked so real, so alive. Not like a secret, not like something that should have been buried in a box in my basement. I turned the photo over slowly. My breath stopped. Written in careful handwriting were the words, "For Richard in case I don't make it. Her name is Lily Ann." The room seemed to tilt. Her name, Lily Ann, not Lila, but close enough to send a cold wave through my entire body. My mind raced trying to connect the pieces. Teresa, a baby, a name, a death, and now Lila. My heart began to pound so hard it hurt. Richard, I whispered. Had he? No. I couldn't even finish the thought. But it was already there. Growing, expanding, taking over everything. Had my husband had a child before me? A child he never told me about. A child that might still be alive. I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying to steady my breathing. This wasn't just a secret. This was a life, a whole life, hidden. I sank down onto the cold basement floor, the photo still clutched in my hand. Memories flooded my mind. The early years of our marriage, the way Richard had sometimes seemed distant when we talked about having children, the way he had avoided certain conversations about his past. I had always assumed it was just youth, old mistakes, things people didn't like to revisit. But this wasn't something you forget. This wasn't something you bury, unless you were forced to, or chose to. Tears blurred my vision as another thought hit me. 32 years of marriage, and I had never known, not even a hint, not even a shadow. What else didn't I know? I looked back down at the box. There were more papers inside, legal documents, letters, but my hands were shaking too much to go through them, because I already knew enough. Or at least, I thought I did. This wasn't about an affair. This was about something far more complicated, far more painful, and far more dangerous to everything I believed about my marriage. I wiped my tears roughly, forcing myself to stand. No more guessing, no more half-truths. I needed to hear it from him, all of it, because if I didn't, I was going to lose my mind trying to fill in the blanks myself. I held the photograph tightly as I walked back upstairs. The house felt different now, not just heavy, haunted, by a past that had been hiding in plain sight. And for the first time since I heard that name whispered in the dark, I wasn't just afraid of what I might find. I was afraid of what it would mean. I didn't wait for the evening. I didn't wait for the right moment. There was no right moment anymore. By the time Richard walked through the front door, I was already standing in the living room, the photograph in my hand, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my chest. He paused when he saw me, not confused, not relaxed, alert. "Everly," he said slowly, "what's wrong?" I didn't answer. I just held up the photograph. For a split second, nothing happened. Then I saw it. The exact moment his world shifted. The color drained from his face. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes locked onto the image like it was something he had buried so deep he never expected to see it again. "Where did you get that?" He asked, his voice low, almost unrecognizable. "That's not the question," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay steady. "The question is, who is she?" Silence. Thick, heavy, suffocating. Richard looked away first, and that told me everything. My throat tightened. "Don't do that," I whispered. "Don't shut me out, not now." He ran a hand over his face, pacing a few steps like he was trying to gather thoughts that refused to line up. "Everly. I can explain." "Then explain," I cut in sharply, because right now all I see is a woman I've never heard of, a baby I didn't know existed, and a husband who's been lying to me for 32 years. "I didn't lie," he said quickly. The words hit me like a slap. "No." I let out a hollow laugh. "Then what do you call this?" I stepped forward and placed the photograph on the table between us like evidence in a courtroom. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping just slightly. That was before you, he said. Before me. The phrase echoed in my mind. How far before me, I asked quietly. His jaw tightened. A long time ago. Her name is Teresa. I said, my voice steadier now, sharper. She died in childbirth. His eyes snapped up to mine. So I continued. And that baby. Lillian. The silence that followed was louder than anything he could have said. I watched him closely, waiting, hoping against all logic that he would deny it, that he would tell me I misunderstood, that there was some explanation that didn't shatter everything I thought I knew. But he didn't. He just stood there, and that was worse. Richard, my voice cracked, do you have a daughter? His eyes closed for a brief second, just one, but it was enough. I don't know, he said. The answer stunned me. What do you mean you don't know? I demanded. I mean exactly that, he replied, his voice strained. I was told she didn't survive. The words hung in the air, fragile and heavy. I stared at him, trying to process it. You were told, I repeated. He nodded slowly. My mind raced. The death certificate, the bracelet, the photo, and now this. You're telling me I said carefully, each word measured, that you had a child and you just believed she died and never questioned it. His expression twisted with something I couldn't quite name. Pain? Regret? Maybe even shame. It wasn't that simple, he said. Then make it simple, I shot back, because right now nothing about this makes sense. He turned away, running both hands through his hair. I was young, he began. I didn't have anything, no money, no stability. Teresa's family, they hated me. They blamed me for everything. For her death, I asked quietly. He nodded once. They didn't want me anywhere near the baby, he continued. They said I wasn't fit, that I'd ruin her life. My chest tightened, and then I pressed. There were complications, he said, his voice dropping. After Teresa died, they told me the baby didn't make it either. I felt something inside me shift, not soften, but hesitate. Just like that, I asked. They told you, and you believed them. His eyes met mine again, and this time I saw it. The weight he had been carrying. I didn't just believe them, he said quietly. I had no choice. The room fell silent. I wanted to be angry. I was angry. But there was something else now creeping in beneath it. Something uncomfortable, something complicated. Then explain this, I said, picking up the photograph again. Explain why you kept all of this. If she was gone, why hold on to it? He looked at the photo, his expression softening in a way I had never seen before. Because she was never just gone to me, he said. The words hit me harder than I expected. She was my daughter, he added, his voice barely above a whisper, even if I never got to know her. My throat tightened. For a moment, just a moment. I saw him not as my husband, but as a young man standing in a hospital hallway losing everything at once. But the moment didn't last. Because reality came crashing back in. Then who is Lila? I asked. That changed everything. His entire body tensed. His eyes darkened. And just like that, the wall came back up. Everly. He said carefully, you don't need to get involved in that. I stared at him in disbelief. Don't need to get involved, I repeated. I already am involved. You brought this into our life the second you started hiding it. I wasn't hiding it, he insisted. Then what do you call it? I snapped. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like a secret. He hesitated. Just for a second. But that second was enough. Richard, I said, my voice dropping colder now, sharper. Is Lila your daughter? Silence. Long, painful, unbearable. He didn't answer. Not directly, but he didn't deny it either. And in that moment, I knew. A wave of emotion crashed over me so suddenly I had to grab the edge of the table to steady myself. 32 years, I whispered. 32 years, Richard, and you never told me. I didn't know, he said quickly. Not for sure. But you suspected I fired back. He didn't answer, which meant yes. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Does she know about me? I asked. Another hesitation. Yes, he admitted quietly. That hurt more than anything else. She knows about me, I repeated. But I didn't know about her. I was trying to protect you, he said. There it was again, that word, protect. Something inside me snapped. Protect me from what I demanded. The truth. Your past or the fact that you made a decision for both of us without giving me a choice. It's not like that. "Then what is it like, Richard?" I cut, in my voice rising, because from where I stand it looks like you decided what I could handle, what I deserved to know, what kind of marriage I was allowed to have. "That's not fair," he said, his voice strained. "No," I shot back. "What's not fair is building a life with someone who thinks they have the right to hide something this big." The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't just heavy, it was broken. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in 32 years, I didn't know who I was standing in front of. "I need space," I said quietly. "Everly." "I need space," I repeated firmer this time. He stopped, nodded slowly, and stepped back. That hurt too, because part of me wanted him to fight, to insist, to fix it. But he didn't. I turned and walked down the hallway, my chest tight, my vision blurred. When I reached the guest room, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, my body finally giving in to the weight of everything. The tears came fast, relentless, because this wasn't just about another woman. This wasn't just about a secret child. This was about trust, about truth, about a marriage I thought was built on both. And now, I didn't know what was real anymore. On the other side of the door, I heard Richard's footsteps. He stopped, just outside. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then quietly through the wood between us, he said, "I was trying to protect all of you." I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks, because somehow that made everything worse. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I lay in the guest bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Richard had said, every pause, every hesitation, every truth that felt incomplete. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It felt like something had been cracked open and there was no way to seal it back. At around 4:30 a.m., I gave up pretending. I sat up slowly, wrapped a sweater around my shoulders, and walked to the window. The sky was still dark, but the edge of morning had begun to push through. Everything outside looked still, normal. Inside me, nothing was. "I can't wait for him to tell me," I whispered, because if I waited, he would choose what to say. And I was done living inside his version of the truth. I needed my own. By 6:00 a.m., I was already in the car. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a message. I just drove. The address I had saved from the hidden photos guided me out of town onto a long stretch of highway that felt strangely endless. The farther I went, the quieter my thoughts became. Not because I was calm, but because I had reached a point where fear had turned into something else. Determination. If Lila existed, if she was real, then I was going to see her. Not through Richard, not through half answers, but with my own eyes. The neighborhood I arrived in wasn't what I expected. It wasn't glamorous, not secretive, not the kind of place you'd imagine a hidden life unfolding. It was ordinary. Small houses, neatly trimmed lawns, a few aging cars parked in driveways, the kind of place where people waved to their neighbors and minded their own business. I parked a little down the street, my hands still gripping the steering wheel even after I turned off the engine. "This is it," I murmured. My heart began to pound again, because for the first time since this started, I wasn't chasing a shadow. I was about to face something real. The house from the photos was easy to recognize. White siding, blue shutters, a small porch with 2 worn chairs. Nothing about it suggested secrets, and yet everything about it did. I stepped out of the car slowly, my legs feeling heavier with each step toward the front door. For a moment I stood there, just breathing, just standing, because once I knocked there would be no going back. No pretending, no unknowing. I raised my hand and knocked. The door opened after a few seconds. It wasn't Lila. It was the woman from the phone. Older, maybe late 60s. Gray hair pulled back neatly. Sharp eyes that immediately studied me like she had been expecting this moment. "Margaret, you came," she said quietly. I swallowed. "You knew I would." She stepped aside without answering. "You'd better come in." I hesitated for only a second before stepping inside. The house smelled faintly of coffee and something warm, vanilla maybe. It felt lived in, comfortable, normal. That word again, normal. Like none of this should be happening here. Margaret closed the door behind me and turned to face me fully. "You shouldn't have found out this way," she said. My chest tightened. Then how was I supposed to find out? because my husband clearly wasn't planning to tell me. Her expression softened slightly, not with sympathy, but with understanding. "He's been struggling," she said. "That's not my problem," I replied, sharper than I intended. "Not anymore." She studied me for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Silence settled between us, heavy, loaded. I took a step forward. "I need to know the truth," I said. "All of it. No more pieces, no more half-stories." Margaret exhaled slowly. "You're stronger than he thought you were," she said. "That's not the point," I replied. "He didn't give me the chance to be anything." That seemed to land. She nodded once more, then gestured toward the living room. "Sit," she said. "This isn't a short story." I didn't sit, not yet. "Where is she?" I asked. Margaret's gaze shifted slightly toward the hallway behind her. My heart skipped. "She's here," Margaret said. Everything inside me tightened. "I want to see her." Margaret hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. "She doesn't know you're coming," Margaret said carefully. "I didn't know she existed," I replied. "I think we're past careful introductions." Margaret studied me again, longer this time, as if weighing something. Then finally she nodded. "All right." She turned and walked down the hallway. Each step she took felt like it echoed inside my chest. My hands curled into fists at my sides, trying to steady myself. This was it, the moment everything became real. I heard a door open, muffled voices, then footsteps, 2 sets coming closer. My heart was pounding so loudly now I was sure they could hear it. And then she stepped into the room. Time stopped. For a second, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move, because standing in front of me was a woman who looked like a reflection of something I knew too well. She wasn't a teenager, not even in her 20s. Early 30s maybe, dark hair pulled back simply. No makeup, no performance. Just real, but it wasn't her appearance that shook me, it was her eyes. Richard's eyes. There was no denying it, no explaining it away, no hiding from it. I felt my knees weaken slightly. "You," I whispered. She looked just as stunned. Her gaze flicked between me and Margaret, confusion, and something deeper, something more cautious settling in her expression. "This is," Margaret began softly, Everly. The name seemed to land heavily in the room. The woman Lila stiffened almost imperceptibly, so she knew. Of course she knew. I swallowed hard. "You know who I am," I said quietly. It wasn't a question. Lila nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. Her voice was calm, careful, not defensive, not hostile, and that threw me off completely. I had expected anger, resentment, maybe even confrontation. But this felt like something else entirely. "I didn't know about you," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Simple, raw, true. Lila held my gaze. I figured she replied. No bitterness, no accusation, just fact. And somehow that hurt more, because she wasn't surprised. She wasn't shocked, which meant she had been living with this truth far longer than I had. I took a shaky breath. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you known about him?" Lila glanced at Margaret briefly, then back at me. "My whole life," she said. The room tilted again. "My whole life." I closed my eyes for a second, trying to steady myself. "And him?" I asked. "How long has he known about you?" Her expression shifted slightly. Something more guarded now. "Not long," she said. "About 8 months. 8 months. 8 months of secrets. 8 months of silence. 8 months of a life I knew nothing about." I opened my eyes again, looking between them. "You've met him," I said. Another statement, another truth I already knew. Lila nodded twice. Twice. My chest tightened. "Did he—" I stopped, unsure how to even finish the question. "Did he what Kerstay choose?" Lila seemed to understand anyway. "He didn't know how to be there," she said gently. "But he tried." The words hit me harder than I expected, because they weren't angry, they weren't accusing. They were compassionate toward him. And suddenly, everything shifted again. This wasn't a secret affair. This wasn't betrayal in the way I had feared. This was something far more complicated, far more painful, and far more human. I looked at Lila again. Really looked at her, not as a threat, not as the other woman, but as someone who had been living in the shadow of a story I had just discovered. And for the first time since this began, my anger wavered, not disappeared, but changed. Because standing in front of me wasn't the person who broke my marriage. She was someone who had been broken by the same truth. and that realization terrified me even more. I didn't sit. I couldn't, because if I sat down, it would mean I was ready to hear everything, and I wasn't sure I was. But I also knew I didn't have a choice anymore. Tell me I said my voice quieter now, but steadier than before. From the beginning, no protecting anyone, no skipping parts. Margaret nodded slowly as if she had been waiting for those exact words. Lila remained standing across from me, her arms loosely folded, not defensive, just contained, careful. Like someone who had learned how to exist in difficult conversations without letting them consume her. That alone told me something about her life. Margaret gestured again toward the couch. "You should sit, Everly." This time I did, not because I felt ready, but because my legs were starting to give out. Margaret took a seat across from me, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Lila stayed standing for a moment longer, then quietly sat at the far end of the couch, leaving space between us. The distance felt appropriate, necessary, for now. Margaret inhaled slowly. "This started over 30 years ago," she began. I held my breath. "Your husband Richard was involved with my younger sister Teresa." I nodded once. I already knew that much. But hearing it out loud made it real in a way the photograph hadn't. "They were serious," Margaret continued. "Not a casual relationship, not something temporary. They had plans, a future." Something inside me tightened, because I had always believed I was his great love, and now I was sitting here realizing there had been another life he almost lived. "They struggled," Margaret went on, "financially, emotionally. Teresa's pregnancy wasn't planned, and it came at a time when everything else was already fragile." I glanced briefly at Lila. She sat still, her expression calm, but I could see it the way her fingers pressed lightly into her sleeve. She had heard this story before. Many times, I imagined. "But Richard didn't leave," Margaret said firmly. "That part matters. He stayed. He tried." I looked back at her. "Then what happened?" I asked quietly. Margaret's expression darkened slightly. "The birth was complicated," she said. "Very complicated. There were decisions made, quickly, under pressure, and not all of them were the right ones." A chill ran through me. "Teresa didn't survive," she added. I swallowed hard. "And the baby?" I asked. Margaret hesitated, just for a moment, and that hesitation spoke louder than anything else. "The baby did survive," she said finally. My heart pounded. But Richard was told she didn't. The words landed like a blow. I stared at her, trying to process it. "He was lied to," I whispered. Margaret nodded. "By Teresa's parents," she said. "They blamed him for everything. They didn't want him involved. They didn't want him near the child. And more than that," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "they didn't want questions." "What kind of questions?" I asked. Margaret's gaze dropped for a moment. "There were complications during the delivery," she said. "Mistakes. Ones that could have led to legal consequences. Public attention. Teresa's family had influence. They wanted everything quiet." The pieces began to click together in my mind. "They covered it up," I said slowly. "Yes," Margaret replied. "And Richard—" I hesitated, my voice tightening. "He just accepted it." Margaret looked at me, her expression softer now. "He was 26, she said. He had just lost the woman he loved. He was being told he had also lost his child, and the people surrounding him made it very clear that he had no place in that child's life." I closed my eyes briefly, because I could see it now, not as clearly as someone who lived it, but enough to feel the weight of it. A young man, grieving, alone, outnumbered. They pushed him out. Margaret continued, "And he didn't fight hard enough to stay. There it was. The truth that didn't excuse him, but explained him." I opened my eyes again. "And Lila?" I asked. Margaret glanced toward her. Lila met my gaze this time. Steady, unflinching. "I was raised by her," Lila said, nodding toward Margaret. "Not by Teresa's parents?" I asked. "No," Margaret replied. "They didn't want the responsibility. They wanted the situation buried, not lived with." My chest tightened. "So you took her in," I said. Margaret nodded. "She was my niece, my sister's daughter. There was never a question." I looked at Lila again, at the life she must have had, at the story she grew up with. "Did you know about Richard?" I asked her gently. She hesitated, then nodded. Not everything she said, but I knew there was a man, my father, and that he didn't know I was alive. My heart twisted. "How do you grow up with that?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her lips pressed together slightly. "You don't," she said. "You just live around it." The simplicity of her answer hit me harder than anything else, because it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't emotional, it was quiet, resigned. And that told me more than any tears could have. I turned back to Margaret. "How did he find out?" I asked. Margaret exhaled slowly. "Years passed," she said. "I tried to reach out once early on, but Teresa's family shut it down. They made it clear they would cause problems, legal, personal, everything if I brought him back into the picture. So you stopped," I said. "I had to," she replied. "For Lila." That made sense, even if it didn't feel right. "Then what changed?" I asked. Margaret leaned back slightly. "Time," she said, "people get older. Control weakens. Secrets become harder to hold." She paused. "And then there was a DNA match." I blinked. "What an ancestry website," Lila explained quietly. I didn't expect anything. I just wanted to know more about where I came from. "And you found him," I said. She nodded. My chest tightened again. And then I asked. Margaret answered this time. "I contacted him," she said, "carefully, privately. I didn't want to shock him. I didn't want to destroy whatever life he had built." I let out a soft, hollow breath. Too late. "He didn't believe me at first," she continued. "Not fully, but once the evidence was there was no denying it." I thought about the note on his phone. I should have told her years ago. That wasn't about Teresa. That wasn't about the past. That was about me. And he's been, seeing her? I asked, my voice barely steady. "Twice," Lila said again, "just to talk." Why, only twice, I pressed. This time Margaret and Lila exchanged a look, one that made my stomach drop. Because he was afraid, Lila said gently. "Of what?" I asked. She looked directly at me. "Of losing you." The words landed softly, but they shattered something inside me anyway. I let out a shaky breath, looking down at my hands. Because part of me wanted to be angry about that, to say he should have told me anyway. That fear wasn't an excuse, and another part of me understood exactly why he hadn't. I looked back up at Lila, at the woman I had feared, suspected, almost hated without knowing her, and all I saw now was someone who had been living with this truth her entire life, while I had only just discovered it. "I thought you were—" I stopped. "A threat," she finished quietly. I nodded, ashamed. She gave a small, almost sad smile. "I get that," she said. And somehow, that made everything hurt even more, because she wasn't my enemy. She never had been. And yet, her existence had just changed everything about my life. The drive home felt longer than the drive there, not because of distance, but because I wasn't the same person making the trip back. When I had left that morning, I was a wife, chasing suspicion, afraid of betrayal, bracing for the kind of pain I thought I understood. But now I was carrying something far heavier. The truth. And the truth didn't fit neatly into anger. It didn't stay inside one emotion. It stretched, pulled, forced me to see things I wasn't ready to see. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were still gripping the steering wheel, even though the engine had been off for a full minute. "This changes everything," I whispered. And it did, but not in the way I had expected. Richard's car was already there. Of course it was. He hadn't gone to work. A strange mix of relief and tension settled in my chest. He was waiting. That meant he knew something had shifted. Maybe not everything, but enough. I stepped out of the car slowly, my legs feeling heavier than they should. Each step toward the front door felt deliberate, measured, like I was walking into something I couldn't undo. When I opened the door, I found him exactly where I expected, sitting at the kitchen table, hands clasped, eyes tired. He looked up the moment I entered. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he stood. "Everly," he said, his voice cautious, searching. I closed the door behind me. I went to see her. The words landed between us instantly. Sharp, final, his entire body stilled. "You... what?" he asked quietly. I went to the address. I continued my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I met Margaret. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. And I met Lila. That was the moment it hit him. Not just that I knew, but that I knew everything he had tried to control. His shoulders dropped slightly, like something he had been holding up for months had finally collapsed. You shouldn't have done that, he said. Not angry, not harsh, just tired. I'd felt something inside me tighten. Don't say that, I replied, my voice sharper now. Don't tell me what I should or shouldn't have done when you're the one who put me in this position. He looked down, rubbing his hands together slowly. I was going to tell you, he said. When I asked immediately, after another 8 months, a year, or never. He flinched. And I hated that I noticed, because part of me still cared, still reacted, still felt. I didn't know how he admitted. That's not an answer, I said. It's the truth, he replied, looking back at me. We held each other's gaze for a long moment, and for the first time since this started, there was no pretending, no avoiding. Just two people standing in the middle of something broken. I know about Teresa, I said quietly. His expression shifted again. I know what happened, I continued. About the pregnancy, the birth, the lie. He swallowed hard. And I know about Lila, I added. Your daughter. The word hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. Richard closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. Yes, it was the first time he had said it out loud. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just truth. And somehow, that hurt more than all the silence before it. I took a slow breath. You met her, I said. Yes, twice. Yes, and in 8 months. I paused, my voice tightening. You couldn't find a way to tell me. He looked at me, something raw and unguarded in his eyes. I was afraid, he said. There it was again, that word. Fear. I let out a quiet, almost humorless laugh. You keep saying that, I said, like it's supposed to explain everything. It does explain it, he replied. It doesn't excuse it, I know that, but it's the truth. I studied him for a moment, really studied him. Not as my husband, but as the man who had been carrying this secret. You thought I would leave, I said. It wasn't a question. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes. And instead of risking that, I continued, you chose to lie. I didn't lie. You hid it. I cut in. You controlled it. You decided what I deserved to know. That's the same thing, Richard. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders sinking again. I didn't want to lose you, he said. The words were simple, honest, and completely unfair. Do you hear yourself? I asked, my voice soft but firm. You didn't want to lose me, so you built something that could make me lose you anyway. He didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. I stepped closer to the table, resting my hands against the edge to steady myself. She doesn't hate you, I said after a moment. His head lifted slightly. What, he asked? Lila, I clarified. She doesn't hate you. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, relief, guilt, all at once. She should, he said quietly. But she doesn't, I replied. And that says more about her than it does about you. He nodded slowly, absorbing that. She just wants the truth, I added. That's all she's ever wanted. Silence settled again, but this time, it felt different. Less sharp, still painful, but clearer. I didn't know she was alive, he said after a while. Not until 8 months ago. Everything before that, I thought I had lost her. I believed that, I said. And I meant it. That was the strange part. Somewhere between the anger and the hurt, belief had crept in. Because the story made sense. Because the pain in his voice was real. Because not all secrets are born from betrayal. Some are born from loss. But that didn't make what came after okay. I believe you didn't know, I continued. But that's not where this started breaking, Richard. He looked at me carefully. It started breaking the moment you found out and chose not to tell me. The truth settled heavily between us, I know, he said quietly. I searched his face, waiting for something, anything. What were you planning to do, I asked. He hesitated. I don't know, he admitted. I was trying to figure it out. For 8 months I pressed. Yes, he said, because every option felt like I was going to hurt someone. I let out a slow breath. That's life, I said softly. Sometimes there isn't a way to avoid hurting people. There's only a way to be honest about it. He nodded, his gaze dropping again. I should have told you, he said. Yes, I replied. I should have trusted you. Yes, I should have stopped deciding for me, I finished. He looked up. And this time, there was no argument. No more secrets, I said. It wasn't a request. It was a line, a boundary. He nodded immediately. No more, he agreed. I held his gaze for a moment longer, trying to feel something solid, something certain, but everything still felt unstable, like the ground beneath us hadn't fully settled yet. I met her I said again, more quietly this time. His expression softened slightly, and he asked. I hesitated, because I didn't know how to explain it. How do you describe meeting someone who shouldn't exist in your life? But she's not what I expected, I said finally. A faint, almost sad smile touched his lips. I know, he said. I swallowed. She's kind, I added. He nodded. Yes, and she's been living with this her whole life, I said. His eyes closed briefly. I know, he repeated. That phrase again, I know, but knowing hadn't been enough. Not yet. I straightened slightly, stepping back. This isn't over, I said. I know, he replied. We're not okay, I added. I know. And I don't know how we get back from this, I said honestly. He didn't answer right away, because there was no easy answer. But then quietly, he said, we start with the truth. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since this began, I didn't feel like I was standing in the dark anymore. I felt like I was standing in something far more difficult, the light and the truth, no matter how late it came. Telling the children was the part I dreaded the most, not because I didn't think they could handle the truth, but because I knew. Once they knew, there was no going back to the version of our family they had grown up believing in, and neither Richard nor I could control how they would see us after that. We chose Sunday, neutral ground, late afternoon, the kind of time that usually meant comfort, family dinners, laughter, easy conversations. Not this time. Sophia arrived first. She walked in with her usual energy, a container of homemade pasta in her hands, and a smile on her face. Hey, Mom, she said, leaning in to hug me. What's going on? You sounded serious on the phone. I forced a small smile. We need to talk. Let's wait for Lucas. Her expression shifted immediately. Concern, curiosity, a hint of unease. She set the food down slowly, glancing toward Richard, who stood near the kitchen counter, quieter than usual. What's this about? She asked. You'll understand in a minute, I said gently. Lucas arrived 10 minutes later, his teenage daughter Emma trailing behind him, headphones around her neck, barely looking up from her phone. Hey, Lucas said, giving me a quick hug. What's going on? I looked at Richard. He looked at me. And in that moment, we both knew there was no perfect way to do this. So I stepped forward. Emma, I said softly, sweetheart, could you give us a little time in the living room? She glanced up, slightly annoyed, but not questioning. Yeah, sure. She walked off, leaving the adult standing in a silence that felt heavier with each passing second. Sophia crossed her arms. Okay, now you're really worrying me. I took a breath and said the words that would change everything. There's something your father and I need to tell you. I don't remember exactly how I started, only that once the words began, they didn't stop. I told them about Teresa, about the pregnancy, about the lie, about Lila. I didn't soften it. I didn't hide behind excuses, because I had already lived that version of the story, and it hadn't protected anyone. By the time I finished, the room felt completely still. Too still. Sophia was the first to react. She laughed, not because it was funny, but because she didn't believe it. You're joking, she said, shaking her head. This is a joke, right? No, I said quietly. Her eyes shifted to Richard. Dad. He didn't look away this time. It's true, he said. That was all it took. The disbelief shattered, and what replaced it was anger. Are you serious? Sophia snapped, her voice rising. You have a daughter, another daughter, and you just... What forgot to mention it, I didn't know she was alive, Richard said carefully. That's not the point, she shot back. You know now. And you didn't tell us, her voice cracked on the last word. And that was when I saw it. Not just anger. Hurt. Deep personal hurt. I was trying to figure out how Richard began. No, Sophia interrupted sharply. Don't say that. Don't say you were trying to figure it out. That's what people say when they're avoiding something. He flinched slightly, but didn't argue, because she wasn't wrong. Sophia turned to me. And you? She asked. You just found out. I nodded. A few days ago. Her expression softened for half a second, then hardened again. This is insane, she muttered, running a hand through her hair. 35 years, and suddenly we have a sister. Lucas hadn't spoken yet. He stood slightly apart from us, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Lucas, I said gently. He looked up slowly, not angry, not loud, just quiet. How long, he asked. Richard hesitated. 8 months. Lucas nodded once. That was it. No explosion, no raised voice. But somehow, that felt worse. 8 months, he repeated quietly. And you didn't think maybe we deserved to know I did, Richard said. I just didn't want to deal with it, Lucas finished. Richard didn't respond, because again, there was no argument. Lucas let out a slow breath, looking down at the floor. That's a long time to keep something like this from your family, he said. His voice wasn't angry, it was disappointed. And that cut deeper. Sophia, on the other hand, wasn't holding back. This is unbelievable, she said, pacing now. Do you have any idea how this looks, how this feels? I do, Richard said quietly. No, you don't, she snapped. Because if you did, you wouldn't have kept it from us like we were children who couldn't handle it. I was trying to protect. Stop saying that, she shouted. Stop using that word like it makes this okay. The room fell silent again, heavy, fractured. I stepped forward. Sophia, I said softly. I know this is a lot. No, Mom, she said, shaking her head. This isn't just a lot. This is everything. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. This changes how I see him. She added, her voice breaking slightly. How I see our whole family. I felt that one, because it was true. Lucas finally looked up again. What does she want? He asked. The question caught me off guard. Lila, he clarified. What does she want from us? I hesitated, because I knew the answer, but I wasn't sure they were ready to hear it. She doesn't want anything, I said. Sophia let out a sharp laugh. Yeah, right. It's true, I insisted. She doesn't want money. She doesn't want to replace anyone. She just wants the truth. Lucas studied me for a moment. And you believe that? Yes. He nodded slowly. Then she's probably telling the truth, he said. Sophia turned to him stunned. You're just going to accept this. I'm not accepting anything, he replied calmly. I'm just not jumping to conclusions. She scoffed. Well, I am, she said, because this doesn't just happen. People don't just show up out of nowhere after 30 years. She didn't show up, I said gently. She's been there the whole time. We just didn't know. That quieted her for a moment, but not for long. This is going to get out, she said. You realize that, right? Family talks. People ask questions. And then what? We just explain this to everyone, like it's normal. I didn't answer because I didn't have one. And that was when another voice entered the room. So, what are we talking about? We all turned. Emma stood in the doorway, her headphones now hanging loosely around her neck, her eyes wide, and suddenly I felt a new kind of fear settle in my chest. Because this wasn't just about us anymore. It was about the next generation, the ones who hadn't even had a chance to understand the old version of the truth before it was replaced with a new one. And I realized then, this story wasn't done breaking things, not yet. Emma's voice lingered in the doorway, soft but sharp enough to cut through everything we had just said. So, what are we talking about? All of us froze. For a second, no one moved. No one answered. Because there was no easy version of the truth to give her. No simplified explanation that wouldn't unravel into something much bigger. Lucas was the first to react. Emma, he said gently, stepping toward her. Why don't you go back to the living room? We'll be there in a few minutes. She didn't move. Her eyes shifted from him, to me, to Richard, then back again. You guys are acting weird, she said. What's going on? I felt my chest tighten, because I saw it clearly in that moment, the ripple effect of everything we were dealing with. This wasn't just about my marriage, or Richard's past, or Lila's existence. This was about a family, trying to figure out how to survive the truth. Sweetheart, I said softly, we're just having an adult conversation. Nothing you need to worry about. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay. But as she turned and walked away, I could tell she didn't believe me, and that truth would come back to us later. It always does. The room felt heavier after she left, like something fragile had been exposed. Sophia let out a long breath, rubbing her temples. Great. Now even Emma's going to sense something's off. Lucas didn't respond. He just stood there, quieter than before, thinking, processing. That worried me more than Sophia's anger, because silence, like that, meant something deeper was shifting. I think we should meet her, he said finally. The words landed unexpectedly. Sophia turned to him immediately. Excuse me, I said. He repeated calmly, I think we should meet her. You can't be serious, Sophia snapped. We just found out she exists, and now you want to invite her into our lives like this is some kind of reunion. Lucas didn't flinch. I want to understand what's real, he said, not just what we're assuming. She's not the problem, I said quietly. Both of them looked at me. She never was, I added. Sophia shook her head, disbelief written all over her face. Mom, how can you say that? She asked. You don't even know her. I met her, I replied. That stopped her. What she said, her voice dropping. I went to see her, I continued, before you came. Sophia stared at me. You what I needed to know the truth, I said. Not guesses, not fear, the truth, and Lucas asked. I hesitated. Because what I was about to say mattered. It would shape how they saw everything from this point forward. She's not what you think, I said finally. Sophia crossed her arms tightly. And what exactly do you think I think, that she's here to take something from us, I answered. She didn't respond, which meant I was right. She's not. I said, she doesn't want money. She doesn't want to replace anyone. She doesn't even expect anything from us. Then why now? Sophia demanded. Why show up after all this time? She didn't, I said again. She didn't chase him. She didn't look for him like that. She just wanted answers. Lucas leaned forward slightly. What kind of answers? I looked at him. At both of them. The same ones we're asking, I said. Why she grew up without a father who didn't even know she existed. Why her life started with silence. The room went quiet again, but this time, it wasn't just tension. It was something else, something heavier, understanding, even if they didn't want to admit it yet. 2 days later, I met Lila again, this time alone. I chose a small diner just off the interstate, neutral ground, quiet enough for a real conversation, but public enough to keep things from becoming overwhelming. When she walked in, she spotted me immediately. There was no hesitation in her step. No awkward pause, just calm. That unsettled me at first, because I realized something. She had been preparing for this kind of moment her entire life. I had only been dealing with it for a few days. She sat across from me, offering a small, polite smile. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We both knew this wasn't a normal meeting. There was no script for something like this. I didn't expect to hear from you again so soon, she said gently. I didn't expect to come back, I admitted. That earned a small understanding nod. Fair enough. A waitress came by, took our orders, then left us alone again. Silence settled in. Not uncomfortable, just careful. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, I began. Which part? She asked. All of it, I said. But especially that you didn't want anything from us. She leaned back slightly, studying me. That surprised you? Yes, I said honestly. She nodded. Most people assume I want something, she said. It's easier that way. Why, I asked. Because if I want something, she explained, then they can decide whether to give it to me or not. It puts them back in control. Her words hit me harder than I expected. And if you don't want anything I asked, then they have to deal with what's already there, she said quietly. The truth. Unavoidable. I looked down at my coffee for a moment, then back up at her. What do you want? I asked. She didn't answer right away. She thought about it, carefully. I want to understand my own story, she said finally. That's it. That's all I pressed. She gave a small, almost sad smile. You'd be surprised how big that is, she said. I believed her. More than I expected to. Do you resent him? I asked after a moment. She shook her head. No, not even a little. No, she repeated. I can't resent someone for something they didn't know. I studied her face, looking for cracks, for hidden anger, but there wasn't any, just clarity. That doesn't mean it didn't affect me, she added. I know, I said softly. I grew up wondering, she continued. Not about money, not about what I was missing, just why? Her voice didn't break, but I could feel the weight behind it. Why I didn't have answers, she said. Why everything about where I came from felt incomplete. I swallowed hard. Because I understood that feeling, more than I wanted to admit. And now I asked. She met my eyes. Now I have pieces, she said, but I'm still putting them together. I nodded slowly. Us too, I admitted. A faint smile touched her lips. Yeah, she said, I figured. We sat in silence again. But this time, it felt different. Less guarded. More real. I was scared of you, I said suddenly. She raised an eyebrow slightly. Why, because I thought you were going to take something from me, I said. My marriage, my family, my life. She shook her head gently. I don't want your life, she said. Her voice was calm, certain. I just wanted to understand mine. The simplicity of that, it broke something open inside me, because all this time, I had been looking at her like a threat, when really, she'd been standing on the outside of a story I had always taken for granted, and for the first time since this began, I didn't see her as the reason my world had changed. I saw her as someone who had been living in the consequences of it, long before I ever knew it existed. I thought I understood the truth. I thought I had finally reached the bottom of it, that painful, complicated place where everything ugly had already surfaced, and all that remained was learning how to live with it. I was wrong, because the truth doesn't always arrive all at once. Sometimes it waits until you're just steady enough to hear it, and then it breaks you again. It happened 3 nights after my second meeting with Laya. Richard and I were sitting in the living room, not quite together, not quite apart. The television was on, but neither of us was watching. It had become our new normal sharing space without pretending everything was okay. I've been thinking, he said quietly. I didn't look at him. That's usually when something bad follows, I replied. A faint, tired smile crossed his face. Yeah, he said, that's fair. Silence settled again. But this time, it didn't last. There's something I didn't tell you, he added. My body went still. Every muscle, every thought, every fragile piece of progress we had made. Of course there is, I said, slowly turning to face him. His expression tightened. Not defensive, not dismissive, just resigned. I was going to tell you, he said. When I asked immediately, before or after, it destroys everything again. He flinched. I deserve that, he said quietly. Yes, you do, I replied. We held each other's gaze, and I saw it. Whatever he was about to say, it mattered, a lot. Say it, I said. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to steady himself. When Teresa died, he began his voice low. There were people involved, lawyers, hospital administrators, her family. I nodded slightly. I figured as much. They were trying to control the situation, he continued. Keep everything quiet, avoid questions. Yes, I said, Margaret told me. He hesitated. That's not all he added. Something inside me tightened again. Go on. He looked down for a moment, then back up. I signed something. The words were simple, but they landed heavily. What kind of something, I asked carefully. Documents, he said, legal ones. My stomach dropped. What kind of legal documents, Richard, he swallowed. At the time, I didn't fully understand them, he admitted. I was grieving. I was overwhelmed. And they kept pushing papers in front of me. That's not an answer, I said, my voice sharper now. His jaw tightened. They were liability waivers, he said finally. Agreements that limited any investigation into what happened during the birth. The room seemed to shrink. You're telling me, I said slowly, that you signed papers that helped cover up whatever went wrong. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. My heart started pounding again, faster this time. Richard, my voice dropped colder now. Tell me you didn't know what you were doing. I didn't, he said quickly, not fully. I knew it was about protecting the hospital and Teresa's family, but I didn't know the extent of it. But you signed anyway. Yes, the word hit like a hammer. I stood up suddenly, the space between us no longer bearable. Do you understand what that means? I asked, my voice rising. Do you understand what you were part of? I didn't have a choice, he said. There's always a choice, I snapped. Not like that, he replied, his voice breaking slightly. Not when you're 26 and everything you love is gone, and the only people around you are telling you this is the only way forward. I shook my head, pacing now. This is unbelievable, I muttered. This just keeps getting worse. I know, he said quietly. No, you don't, I shot back. Because you lived with this. You carried it. You decided how to handle it. I'm the one just finding out that my husband wasn't just hiding a daughter he was part of, burying the truth about her mother's death. That's not fair, he said, standing now. Isn't it? I challenged. Because from where I'm standing, that's exactly what it looks like. I didn't want to bury anything he said. I was trying to survive it. And what about now? I pressed. What about the last 8 months, when you found out Lila was alive, when you knew what really happened? He hesitated, and that hesitation, it broke something in me all over again. You still didn't tell me everything I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. I was going to stop saying that I snapped. You keep saying that like it changes anything, like intent matters more than action. He fell silent. Because again, there was no defense. I turned away from him, pressing my hands against the edge of the table to steady myself. This wasn't just about the past anymore. This wasn't just about a hidden child. This was about the man I had trusted, being connected to something much darker than I had imagined. Does Lila know? I asked after a long moment. No, he said. I turned back to him slowly. She doesn't know, I repeated. He shook his head. I didn't want to burden her with that, he said. I let out a hollow laugh. Of course you didn't, I said, because you're still deciding what other people should or shouldn't know. That's not what I'm doing, he insisted. It is exactly what you're doing, I replied. You're still controlling the truth, just like before. He looked at me, something desperate in his eyes now. I was trying to protect her, he said. There it is again, I said. That word, protect. I stepped closer, my voice steady but sharp. Do you understand that your version of protection is what created all of this? He didn't answer. Your silence didn't protect anyone. I continued. It just delayed the damage. The truth hung between us, unavoidable, painful, real. I took a slow breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. This changes things, I said quietly. I know, he replied. No, I said, shaking my head. You don't, because this isn't just about trust anymore. He watched me carefully. This is about who you are, I said. The words were harsh, but they were honest. And I don't know if I recognize that person right now. That landed hard. I saw it in his face. The realization, the fear, the weight of what he might lose. I'm still the same man, he said quietly. I held his gaze. No, I said softly. You're not. Silence filled the room again, but this time, it felt final. Not broken, not fragile. Just clear. I need time, I said. He nodded immediately. Take it. I'm serious, Richard, I added. I don't know what this means for us yet. I don't know if I can move past this. His expression tightened, but he didn't argue, because deep down, he already knew. I understand, he said. And for once, I believed him, because this wasn't something he could fix with words. This wasn't something either of us could rush. This was something that would either break us completely or force us to rebuild everything from the ground up. And for the first time since this began, I didn't know which way it would go. The house felt too quiet the next morning. Not the peaceful quiet I used to love, the kind that came with routine and familiarity, but a hollow kind of silence, like something essential had been stripped away. Richard had already left. No note, no message, just absence. And strangely, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt relieved, because for the first time in days, I could hear my own thoughts without his presence shaping them. I stood in the kitchen staring at the same table where our life had unfolded for decades. Birthdays, arguments, apologies, laughter. It all still existed, but it felt like it belonged to a different version of us, a version built on something incomplete. I need to decide who I am in this, I whispered, because this wasn't just about Richard anymore. It was about me, what I could accept, what I could forgive, what I could live with. By midday, I had made a decision, not a final one, but a necessary one. I picked up my phone and called Margaret. She answered on the third ring. Everly, I need to see you, I said. There was a pause. Then I figured you might. An hour later, I was back in that same house. But this time, I wasn't walking in as someone chasing answers. I was walking in as someone ready to face them. Margaret opened the door before I could knock. You look different, she said. I feel different, I replied. She stepped aside to let me in. Is she here? I asked. Margaret nodded. In the back. I took a breath. Good. We didn't sit in the living room this time. Margaret led me to a small dining area near the back of the house. Lila was already there, seated at the table, a cup of tea in front of her. She looked up as I entered. Not surprised, not guarded, just present. You came back, she said. I did, I replied. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Margaret remained standing for a moment, watching both of us carefully. Then she spoke. "You're ready for the rest," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, yes. Lila's gaze sharpened slightly. The rest she echoed. I looked at her, and for a brief second I hesitated. Because once I said it, there was no going back. "You don't know everything," I said gently. Her expression didn't change much, but I saw it. The shift, the awareness, about what she asked. I glanced at Margaret. She nodded. "Go ahead," so I did. "About what happened when you were born," I said. Silence filled the room instantly. Lila's fingers tightened slightly around her cup. "What about it?" she asked, her voice steady but quieter now. I took a slow breath. "Richard told me something," I said. "Something he didn't want you to carry." Margaret moved closer, her expression tense now. "Everly," she started, but I shook my head. "No more silence," I said firmly. "Not for her, not anymore." Lila watched me carefully. "Just say it," she said. So I did. "There were legal documents signed after your mother died," I explained. "Documents that limited any investigation into the complications during your birth." Her expression didn't change at first. Then slowly, it did. Confusion, then understanding, then something deeper. "Are you saying," she began, her voice tightening, "that what happened to my mother wasn't fully investigated?" I nodded. Yes. The words settled heavily. Lila leaned back slightly, processing. "And my father?" she asked. I held her gaze. "He signed those documents," I said. The room went completely still. Margaret closed her eyes briefly, as if she had been hoping this moment wouldn't come like this. Lila didn't react immediately. She didn't break, didn't cry, didn't raise her voice. She just sat there, quiet, still, and that silence was louder than anything else. "How much did he know?" she asked finally. I hesitated. Not everything, I said, but enough to understand that something wasn't right. Her jaw tightened slightly, and he still signed, "Yes." Another silence. Longer this time. Heavier. Margaret stepped forward. "Lila," she said softly, "he was young. He was grieving. He was being pressured." I know Lila interrupted gently. Her voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't defensive. It was controlled. Too controlled. "I understand all of that," she added. I watched her closely, because I recognized that tone, that calm, that quiet. It wasn't peace. It was restraint. And he never told me, she continued. The words were simple, but they carried weight. "I just found out myself," I said. She nodded slowly. "I believe you." That surprised me. "You do?" I asked. "Yes," she said, "because if you had known, you wouldn't be sitting here like this." She wasn't wrong. I swallowed hard. "I didn't want you to hear it later," I said, "from someone else, or in a way that twists it." Lila gave a faint, almost distant smile. "Truth has a way of twisting on its own," she said. Margaret placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to carry this right now," she said. But Lila shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "I think I do." She looked back at me. "Does he regret it?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "More than anything." She studied my face for a moment, as if measuring the truth of that. Then she nodded. "I figured," she said. Silence settled again, but this time, it wasn't just heavy, it was shifting. Something was changing. "I need to talk to him," Lila said finally. Margaret stiffened slightly. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes," Lila replied. "Not later, not after more time. Now." I felt a strange mix of tension and relief, because this was what needed to happen. Not more waiting, not more silence. Truth, direct, unfiltered. "I can arrange that," I said. Lila looked at me. "Will you be there?" she asked. The question surprised me. "Do you want me to be?" I asked. She thought about it, then nodded. "Yes." I exhaled slowly. "Okay," I said. Margaret looked between us, her expression filled with quiet concern. "This is going to be hard," she said. "I know," Lila replied, "and it might not go the way you expect," Margaret added. Lila gave a small, steady nod. "I know that too." She turned back to me. "But I can't keep living in half-truths," she said. "Not anymore." Her words echoed something deep inside me, because that's exactly where I had been just days ago, living in something incomplete, something that looked whole until it wasn't. And now, none of us had that luxury anymore. Then we do it, I said. No more secrets. Lila held my gaze, and for the first time, there was something new there. Not distance, not caution, but connection. Fragile, uncertain, but real, because in that moment, we weren't just two women connected by Richard. We were two people standing on the same side of the truth, and finally ready to face it. The meeting happened 2 days later. Not at our house, not at Margaret's. Somewhere neutral, somewhere no one could claim as their territory. We chose the community hall attached to the small church where Richard's mother used to volunteer before she passed. It was quiet, modest, and familiar enough to keep things grounded, but distant enough to hold something this heavy. I arrived early. Of course I did. I needed time to breathe in the space before everything shifted again. The folding chairs were already set up in a loose circle as if the room itself knew this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. Sunlight filtered in through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. I stood in the center of the room trying to steady myself. This wasn't just another confrontation. This was the moment everything came together. Or fell apart. Richard arrived next. He walked in slowly, his eyes scanning the room before landing on me. For a brief second, neither of us spoke. Then he nodded. "Thank you for being here," he said quietly. I didn't answer. Because this wasn't about me anymore. "You know why we're here," I said instead. He swallowed. "Yes." His voice was tight, controlled, but I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't ready. None of us were. Margaret and Lila arrived together. The moment Lila stepped into the room, the air shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough. Richard saw her immediately, and everything in him changed. I had never seen that expression before. Not in 32 years. Shock, recognition, guilt, hope, all at once. "Lila," he said softly. Her name sounded different this time. Not like a secret, not like something hidden in sleep, but something real, something standing in front of him. She didn't move toward him, didn't speak right away. She just stood there, meeting his eyes, holding the moment. Margaret stepped slightly to the side, giving them space. I remained where I was. Close enough to witness, far enough not to interfere. This wasn't my moment to control. This was theirs. "I didn't expect this to happen like this," Richard said after a long silence. Lila tilted her head slightly. "How did you expect it to happen?" she asked. Her tone wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't soft either. It was honest. That alone shifted the room. "I don't know," he admitted. "That's been the problem," she replied. He flinched, but didn't argue, because again, she wasn't wrong. "I know about the documents," she said, just like that. No build-up, no hesitation. The words landed heavily. Richard's expression tightened instantly. He glanced at me. I held his gaze, didn't look away, because this was part of the truth now, and there was no putting it back. "You told her," he asked quietly. "I told her what she deserved to know," I replied. Lila stepped forward slightly. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" she asked. Richard shook his head slowly. "I didn't want you to carry that," he said. She let out a small, controlled breath. "You don't get to decide that," she replied. The words were calm, but firm, and they echoed something I had said just days before. Richard's shoulders dropped slightly. "I know," he said. Silence stretched between them, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of everything that hadn't been said for 30 years. "I need to ask you something," Lila said. "Anything," he replied immediately. She held his gaze. "When you signed those papers, did you know something wasn't right?" The question hung in the air, sharp, direct, unavoidable. Richard didn't answer right away, and that hesitation said everything. "Yes," he said finally. Lila nodded once. Not surprised, not shocked, just confirming. "Then why?" she asked. His voice broke slightly when he answered. "Because I was told it was the only way to move forward," he said. "Because I didn't have anyone on my side. Because I was broken." Her expression softened for just a second. "But only for a second. And what about after she pressed, when you found out I was alive?" He swallowed hard. "I didn't know how to fix it," he admitted. "You don't fix it," she said. "You face it." The simplicity of that hit all of us, because it was true. "I'm sorry," Richard said suddenly. Not carefully, not rehearsed, just raw. "I'm sorry for what happened, for what I did, for what I didn't do, for not finding you sooner, for not telling them sooner, for all of it. His voice shook. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. I don't expect forgiveness, he added. I don't even know if I deserve it, but I needed you to hear that. The room went quiet again. Lila stood there, still, processing. And then she spoke. I'm not here to punish you, she said. His head lifted slightly. I'm not here to decide whether you deserve forgiveness or not, she continued. That's not my role. Then why are you here, he asked. She took a slow breath. I'm here because this is part of my story, she said, and I deserve to understand it. Without silence. Her words echoed through the room, strong, clear, unshakable. Margaret stepped forward then. This should have happened a long time ago, she said quietly. Yes, Richard replied. I tried, she added, but your world and hers were kept separate on purpose. I know, he said again. That phrase, still there, but now, it carried weight, responsibility, not avoidance. I watched all of them, standing there, connected by something none of us chose, and yet, here we were, facing it anyway. I think we all need to accept something, I said, finally. They all turned to me. This doesn't have a clean ending, I continued. There's no version of this where everything is suddenly okay. Lila nodded slightly. Richard didn't speak. But that doesn't mean it has to stay broken, I added. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. Because just days ago? I didn't believe that. At that moment, the door to the hall opened again. We all turned, and my heart dropped slightly. Sophia, Lucas, and Emma. They stood there hesitant, unsure. I figured we should be here, Lucas said quietly. Sophia didn't speak. Her eyes were locked on Lila, taking her in, processing. Emma stepped forward slightly. Is that? She began. Yes, I said softly, that's Lila. The room shifted again, new energy, new tension, but also something else, something fragile. Possibility. Because this wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about what we chose to do with it. And for the first time, no one walked away. No one moved when Sophia, Lucas, and Emma stepped into the room. It was as if the air itself had thickened, holding all of us in place. 6 people connected by a truth none of us had chosen. Yet all of us now had to carry. Sophia's eyes stayed locked on Lila. Not hostile, not warm, just searching. Lucas stood slightly behind her, quieter as always, his gaze moving between Richard and Lila like he was trying to understand where everything fit now. Emma, on the other hand, stepped forward first, curious, unfiltered, honest in a way the rest of us no longer knew how to be. So, you're really my grandpa's daughter? She asked. The bluntness of it cut through the tension. Lila blinked, slightly caught off guard, but not offended. Yes, she said gently. Emma tilted her head. That's kind of wild. A few of us let out small, nervous breaths. Not quite laughter, but something close enough to release the pressure building in the room. Children have a way of doing that. Of stepping into chaos and naming it simply. Without judgment, without history, just truth. Sophia finally stepped forward. Slow, measured, her eyes still fixed on Lila. So she said, her voice controlled, this is her. It wasn't a question. Lila met her gaze. Yes. Another silence. Shorter this time, but still heavy. Sophia crossed her arms. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now, she admitted. Lila gave a small nod. I don't think there's a right answer, she said. That seemed to disarm Sophia slightly. Not completely, but enough. Lucas stepped forward next. Hi, he said simply. Lila looked at him. Hi. No tension, no edge, just 2 people acknowledging each other. And somehow, that felt like the most normal moment in the room. Richard hadn't moved. He stood slightly off to the side, watching everything unfold like a man unsure if he had the right to step back in. I noticed it immediately. That distance, that hesitation, and for the first time since all of this began, I understood it. Not as avoidance, but as awareness. He didn't know where he belonged in this moment, and maybe that was part of the consequence. I think we should sit, I said softly. No one argued. We all moved slowly, pulling chairs into a loose circle. Not perfect, not symmetrical, but close enough. Lila sat across from Richard, Sophia next to me, Lucas beside her. Emma between them, her curiosity still very much alive. Margaret remained slightly behind, watching quietly like she had done for decades, holding the edges of a story that was finally being told. For a while, no one spoke. Because what do you say in a moment like this? How do you begin something that should have started 30 years ago? It was Emma who broke the silence again. "So, what happens now?" she asked. Simple, direct. The question all of us were avoiding. I looked around the circle, at each face, at each version of hurt, of confusion, of uncertainty. I began slowly. "We figure it out together." Sophia let out a small breath. "That sounds nice," she said, "but it doesn't exactly answer anything." "She's right," Lucas added. "We need something more concrete than that." All eyes shifted to Richard. He straightened slightly. Not defensive, but present. "I don't expect anything from any of you," he said. "Not right away. Not at all, if I'm being honest." His voice was steady, careful. "I know I've already made decisions without you," he continued. "I'm not going to do that again. That mattered, more than I expected. This isn't about replacing anyone," he added, glancing briefly at Sophia and Lucas. "It's not about changing what we've built." "Then what is it about?" Sophia asked. He looked at Lila, then back at the rest of us. "It's about not ignoring something that's real," he said. "The truth. Again. Always coming back to that." "I don't want to disrupt your lives," Lila said quietly. Everyone turned to her. "I'm not here to take anything," she continued. "I don't want your traditions, your roles, your history." Her voice was calm but firm. "I just don't want to be invisible anymore." The words settled deeply, because that's what this had been. For her, a life lived on the edge of someone else's story. Unseen, unspoken, unacknowledged. Sophia shifted slightly in her seat. "That's fair," she said. And for the first time, there was no edge in her voice. The conversation didn't resolve everything. It couldn't. Not in one afternoon, not in one room, but something changed. Small things, subtle things. Lucas asked Lila where she worked. She answered. Emma asked if she liked dogs. She smiled and said yes. Sophia didn't ask questions, but she didn't shut down either. And Richard, he listened. More than he spoke. More than I had ever seen him do. Later that evening, back at home, the house felt different again. Not heavy, not suffocating. Just unfamiliar. Like we were standing at the beginning of something new instead of the end of something old. I stood in the kitchen pouring myself a cup of tea when I heard footsteps behind me. Richard. He didn't come too close, didn't reach for me, just stood there. "That went better than I expected," he said quietly. I nodded, "Me too." A pause. "Then thank you," he added. I turned slightly looking at him. "For what I asked, for not walking away," he said. The words lingered, because the truth was, I had thought about it. More than once. "I'm not staying because everything's okay," I said. "I know. I'm staying because I need to see what this becomes." I continued. He nodded. "I understand," and for once it felt like he actually did. That night I didn't sleep in the guest room, but I didn't move back completely either. We existed in the same space. Careful, aware, honest. More honest than we had been in years. A few days later, Lila came to our house for dinner. It wasn't perfect. There were pauses, awkward moments, unspoken thoughts, but no one left the table. And that mattered, more than anything else. Because healing doesn't come in big moments. It comes in small ones, in choosing to stay, in choosing to listen, in choosing truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's late. And as I watched everyone sitting there, Sophia asking cautious questions, Lucas offering quiet observations, Emma laughing at something small, and Lila simply being present, I realized something I hadn't expected. This wasn't the family I thought I had, but it might still become something real, something honest, something worth holding on to. And maybe that was enough. For now. Months passed, not quickly, not easily, but steadily. And that mattered, because for a long time I believed that once something breaks, it either shatters completely or snaps back into place like nothing ever happened. But that's not how life works. Not really. Real life changes shape, and you either learn how to live inside that new shape, or you keep trying to force it back into something it will never be again. In the beginning, everything felt fragile. Every conversation, every glance, every silence, like we were all walking across thin ice, unsure of where it might crack again. Richard and I didn't pretend things were fixed. We didn't rush into forgiveness. We didn't cover things up with routine and hope they would disappear. Instead, we talked. Really talked. More than we had in years. Not always calmly, not always kindly, but honestly. And honesty was new for us, not because we had lied to each other before, but because we had avoided the parts that were uncomfortable, the parts that didn't fit neatly into the life we had built. Now, there was no avoiding anything. Richard started therapy. That was his decision, not mine, not something I asked for, but something he knew he needed. I should have done this a long time ago, he admitted one evening. We were sitting on the back porch, the late summer air soft around us. Probably, I replied. He smiled faintly. I don't expect this to fix everything, he said. It won't, I told him. I know. A pause. But maybe it helps me stop making the same mistakes. That I could respect. Sophia took longer. Her anger didn't disappear overnight. It didn't soften just because the truth made sense. Because for her, this wasn't just about Richard's past. It was about her present, her identity, her understanding of what family meant. You don't just add someone to a family like this, she told me one afternoon. We were sitting at her kitchen table, coffee growing cold between us. I know, I said. It feels like everything shifted, she continued. Like something I thought was stable isn't. I nodded. I felt that too. She looked at me. Then why are you okay with it? I took a moment before answering. I'm not okay with what happened, I said, but I'm learning to be okay with what's true. She sat back, considering that. I don't know if I'm there yet, she admitted. You don't have to be, I said gently. And that was the truth. Healing doesn't move at the same pace for everyone. Lucas surprised me the most, not because he accepted everything easily, but because of how he approached it. Slowly, carefully. Without forcing conclusions, he started meeting Lila on his own. Coffee at first, short conversations, nothing heavy, nothing overwhelming, just building something small. I don't know what she is to me yet, he told me once, but I know she's not the enemy. That was enough, more than enough. And Lila, she never pushed, never demanded, never tried to claim space that wasn't freely given. She showed up when invited. She spoke when spoken to. She listened more than she talked. And slowly, very slowly, she became part of the room, not as an outsider, not as an interruption, but as someone who belonged in her own way. The first time she laughed at our dinner table, it caught all of us off guard. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, just a small, genuine moment. But it changed something because for the first time, it didn't feel like we were trying. It felt like we were just being. Richard never stopped apologizing, not in words, but in actions, in presence, in consistency. He didn't try to control anything anymore, didn't try to protect us from the truth. He let things unfold, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it meant facing things he had avoided for decades, and that mattered more than any promise he could have made. As for me, I changed too, more than I expected, because the truth is, when I first heard that name Lila, I thought my life was ending. I thought everything I had built was about to collapse. I thought I had been replaced, but I was wrong. Not about the pain, not about the betrayal, but about what it meant. Because this was never about another woman taking my place. It was about a truth that had been waiting, long before I ever entered the picture, and I had a choice. To fight it, to reject it, to walk away from it, or to face it, to understand it, to decide what I could live with. One evening, months later, I found myself sitting on the porch again, the same place Richard and I had shared so many quiet moments over the years. He joined me, sitting beside me without saying anything at first. We watched the sky shift slowly as the sun dipped below the horizon. Peaceful, calm, real. "Do you regret staying?" he asked quietly. I thought about it, not for a second, but for a long moment, because it deserved that. "No," I said finally. He exhaled softly. "I'm glad. But that doesn't mean it was easy," I added. "I know, and it doesn't mean everything is fixed. I know that too." I turned slightly, looking at him. "But it means I chose to see what was real," I said, "not just what was comfortable." He nodded. And this time, there was no distance between us, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. Sometimes I still think about that night, the moment I woke up and heard a name that didn't belong in my life, a name that felt like a threat, a crack in everything I believed. But now, I see it differently. That moment didn't destroy my life. It revealed it, all of it, the parts I knew, the parts I didn't, the parts that hurt, and the parts that could still heal. Because love without truth is fragile, but truth, even when it comes late, gives you a chance to build something stronger. Not perfect, but real. And in the end, that's what we chose, all of us, together, in our own time. Sometimes the most painful truths are not the ones that come from betrayal, but the ones that come from silence. We often think we are protecting the people we love by hiding the past, by avoiding difficult conversations, by choosing comfort over honesty. But in reality, silence doesn't protect, it delays. And when the truth finally surfaces, it doesn't just bring answers. It brings everything that was buried with it. This story isn't about a perfect marriage or a perfect family. It's about something much more real. It's about what happens when life refuses to stay simple. When love is tested not by one mistake, but by years of unspoken truths. And most importantly, it's about choice. The choice to walk away, or the choice to stay and rebuild, the choice to hold on to anger, or the courage to understand something deeper. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean accepting what was wrong. It means deciding that the truth matters more than the pain it brings, and that sometimes people are not just the worst thing they've done, they are also what they choose to do after. So I want to ask you, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have walked away? Or would you have stayed and faced the truth? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story touched you in any way, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional family stories like this. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? You're not alone in your story. And sometimes, sharing it is the first step toward healing.